Hey guys, how's it going? So this will be my first official YouTube video on this channel, and I'd like to talk about today the big, bad, beautiful fish, also known as the flower horn. This is my flower horn trigger. He's a very active guy. You can tell by the ball on his head where all the testosterone's going. That's why he's so fidgety all the time. But so this flower horn is called a Zenzu flower horn. That's the strand that they come in, or that he came in, and he was reasonably priced fish. I mean, I got him for $50, and for the size of his KOK on his head, that's a pretty good deal, you know. So flower horns, they started, I'd like to say, I think early to mid 90s. And this is not a fish you're going to find in the wild, okay? I don't know how many of you actually know that, but you're never going to find this in the wild. Flower horns are the kind of fish that were bred for their deformities. You know, it's like the cat, the Munchkin cat, okay? That was a deformity because they have tiny legs, and people want them so bad because they're all cute and whatever. But that was from the deformity. This is a deformity. Where's he at? Ugh. He's a I hate to say it, but he's a deformity, but he's one of those cool deformities. You know, he's a good fish. They're fun to have. You know, you gotta give him a lot of care and attention. Believe it or not, right before I shot this video, or before the shooting of this video, this was actually a clean tank, all nice and clean. And then 15 minutes later, this guy destroys all of it. Seriously, this sand was nice and level. These pieces of driftwood were hovering over here, and somehow he drug them all over there. He's moved the rock by himself. I mean, they're cichlids, so you know they're from the cichlid family, and cichlids are known to be destructive. So he's a pretty decent quality, like I said earlier, for the price of $50. And I just got lucky, and I feed him well, and you know. He's grown pretty reasonably fast. I've only had him for, I like to say, a year and a half now. He's gotten big. I mean, he went from this 3-inch little guy that I had, and he's about, I'd like to say 7 or 8 now. And he's not full grown yet. You know, this is almost a little over half the size that they're going to get. You know, now there's a couple different breeds, okay, so, or different strands rather. So you have the Zenzu, which I was talking about. There's the Golden Monkey, which is obviously a gold pattern looking flower horn. Again, these are all they all look the same, just the colors are different. That's all it is. You got your Golden Monkey, your Confa. Confa's are pretty cool looking. That's more money than I would like to personally spend. And then you have your gold faders. Now, up here in the Northwest, they're pretty common to get between gold monkeys and faders. If you're from the Portland area, you can get them pretty easily. There's a bunch of keepers out here that'll either breed them or they'll be sold at your local fish stores. Not like PetSmart or something like that. I mean, PetSmart from time to time will have flower horns. I wouldn't recommend buying them because most of the time you're buying a females. No offense to the female flower horn, but the difference between females and males is pretty obvious. The KOK on their head is, they'll have either a really small KOK on the head or it's a flat head. Most of the flower horns that I bred, they had flat heads when I mixed them with this guy. So feeding with these guys, there is a couple brands I recommend. My favorite brand actually, let me go grab it real quick. So when feeding flower horns, there is one brand that I absolutely recommend every single time. So with the Golden Monkeys that I've had, him, you know, another Zenzao I always fed him this stuff. It's called Grand Sumo Red. It's a pretty spendy fish food in my opinion, but this gives results. His colors pop out really well, and he will never deny this stuff. I can shake it in front of him, and he's ready to go. So he really likes this stuff. I can't really feed him other things. I mean, you can feed him carnivore pellets. I've done that. bloodworms. I wouldn't recommend feeding him that stuff. Maybe once in a while feed him bloodworms. Every now and again I like to feed him live stuff. He loves live stuff. Anything that moves, he's after it. Now, I'm not really a huge advocate for feeding live food, so you risk him getting sick, and then think about it, you're going to a pet store, not that I would for live feeding, but you go to a pet store, you see fish in there that you're about to buy, and you know, it's like, oh wow, someone's taking me home to a good tank. I mean, not like they know that, but you know, you take them home only to be fed to a fish. I mean, that's kind of unfair, an unfair chance of life for those guys. I mean, it doesn't really seem like a big deal, but as a fish hobbyist, I personally I just feel that way, and it's not something I would like to do. I don't recommend feeding them live food. I wouldn't, just because I don't want to see this guy get sick. I put too much time and money into him for him to just, you know, get sick all of a sudden. So speaking of illnesses, this guy doesn't get sick that often. You know, I mean, I do my water changes, you know. That's a good way to prevent them from getting sick. I mean, that should be a general rule for all fish in the aquarium hobby. He's never gotten sick once. You keep the water clean. I mean, it's that simple. They are actually pretty hardy fish when it comes to illnesses and stuff like this. But do your water changes. I do mine once a week with this guy. And some people treat these things like discus, you know, where you have to change the water every single day. No, you don't have to do that. It's not that bad. It's not hard. So illnesses that you should be aware of, stuff like HIF, hole in the head disease. I've seen flower horns get that. Ick is very common. Dropsy is common. But again, if you take care of your water conditions, you know, you pay attention to all your parameters, just like you should every other fish, you should be perfectly A-okay. Now, with that said, you know, they're a very fun fish to have. I would recommend everybody getting one. I know there's going to be a couple biases because it's such a mixed bred fish. You know, I mean, people make such a big deal out of it. I don't think it's that big of a deal because last time I checked, I love this guy to death and I do a lot for him. Okay, so if they don't like how, you know, I keep breeding these guys, you know, bringing them into the world, then whatever, you know, it's to each his own, but I'm going to enjoy my side of the hobby, you know. And so another thing with these guys is who you mix them with. Now, I've mixed him, believe it or not, with a couple of fish. Even though he's a little bit of a jerk, he gets he does fine with other fish. You know, I've kept bikers in with him. I've kept fellow flower horns in with them, plecos, you know, really tough things. You know, so you got to consider size, and at the same time, you also got to consider how vicious everything else is compared to your flower horn. But for the most part, he's fine. You know, I've kept him in a pretty loaded tank before, back when I didn't know much about the fish hobby, but he does fine. He has killed things, you know, but that's to be expected. I mean, it's always you're always rolling the dice when you mix fish that shouldn't technically go with other fish. I've seen people online mix them with African cichlids. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't mix them with fish that are not as aggressive or the same size. But believe it or not, he actually does well with parrots. Temperature-wise, I always like to keep it in the tropical temper range. Like right now, it's probably, I'd probably say 78 to 80 in the water right now, and he thrives. You know, I remember going on a vacation, just to prove how hardy these guys are again. I remember going on vacation, one of my heaters went out, and I don't know how long it was off, but it must have been anywhere from 2 to 3 days while I was on vacation, and he survived. We live in the Northwest. It gets cold here. But he's fine. Very hardy fish. So yeah, they can be a bit mean. Don't get me wrong, I've been bitten by this guy before, but that's only because I mess around with him so much. I'm not scared to pet him. In fact, when he was little, he let me pet him, and he didn't mind it at all. And the worst that he did was just bump me with his head. It's not bad at all. Now he could bite my finger off. Maybe not bite my finger off, but he has a pretty good bite. And it's kind of funny every time he does it. You know, he tries to act all tough, but on the inside he's a big gushy sweetheart. So anyways, you guys probably want to know the parameters that you should have. So my pH, I've kept him in the general 6.0 to 8.0 range. He does just fine. Now, I kind of break the rules with this one thing, and that is having a bunch of stuff in the tank. Now, as a general rule of thumb with bigger cichlids, you don't want to have, you know, stuff like this around to where they can cut themselves up because they're so big. But I do it because there's a reason behind it. Now, when you have something that looks bland like this sitting in a tank, your flower horn's colors it makes it look like it's coming out more and puts them as a better show fish. And that's honestly pretty cool when you got friends and family come over and they're like, oh, what's that? Oh, what's that on his head? Why is his color so pretty? Because that's the kind of thing you want to hear. You're so proud of what you have that you want to make them the best that they can be. Now, the recommended tank size, and tank size is a really big thing. I can't stress this enough. When you see flower horns online, which I'm sure, if you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you're either getting into the flower horn part of the hobby, or you are thinking about purchasing a flower horn. And so you're studying up. Good. Cahoots to you, that's what you should be doing. But with tank size, be prepared. When you go online, when you're ordering a flower horn, which a lot of people in the US do because not all shops have flower horns, you'll see them in these tiny, you know, what looks to be like 10-gallon spaces, and they're half his size. Well, don't do that, okay? I mean, I've raised this guy in a 55-gallon tank, which is a good starter tank for him. You know, plenty of space, and I even shared him with his first female counterpart. And they did just fine. But after a while, they can get moody, and you can tell because they're not wanting to swim as much. You know, it's pointless for them because they're in such a small quarters. I wouldn't recommend starting out in a small tank. Another general rule of thumb, since, you know, the bigger the tank you have, the less maintenance you have to do, and that's a very true thing. But with cichlids, it's still a lot of maintenance. You know, this guy, he poops crazy. I mean, I feed him a lot because it keeps him happy, it keeps me happy. We're happy. That's the idea. So, you know, but the bigger the tank is, there's more space to account for ammonia, and you always want to have that in check.